On a quiet ridge in the Smoky Mountains, long after most porch lights had gone out, a single phone started to ring. Not the kind of ring you can ignore. The kind that splits the night and makes a woman like Nora Bennett stand up before she's even fully awake. That's our beginning. A kitchen light flicking on, rain tapping the window, and one wild bobcat kitten whose life is about to hang on a yes or a no. Nora's house sits just beyond the last mailbox on a winding Tennessee road. It used to be a family home in the old-fashioned sense. Kids banging doors, her husband clattering around with fishing gear, the TV humming in the background. These days, it's Willow Creek Wildlife Haven, a place where the empty spaces have slowly filled with scrapes and whistles, and the quiet sounds of animals in recovery. She looks at the caller ID, Sheriff's Office. At midnight, that never means something simple. "That it?" she answers, voice still rough from sleep. "Sorry to wake you, Nora," the deputy says. "We've got a situation on Old Mill Road. An adult bobcat was hit by a truck. She didn't make it, but..." He hesitates. "There's a kitten, still breathing. Looks about the size of a shoe." Nora closes her eyes for just a second. You don't do this work for decades without knowing what that really means. A wild bobcat mother is gone, a baby too young to hunt, too young to know which way the forest even is. She glances at the hallway. On the wall are framed photos. Two grown kids at their college graduations, smiling with the easy confidence of people who've already left home behind. A man in a ball cap, arm around her shoulders, frozen in a summer that never came back. The more recent photos are of owls, fawns, and raccoons. The family changed shape, but the urge to care never left. "I'm on my way," she says. The Smoky Mountains at night have a particular kind of quiet. Not empty, just listening. As Nora's truck eases along the slick road, the wipers keep time with her thoughts. She has driven to scenes like this more times than she cares to count. Deer by the guardrail, foxes on the shoulder, an occasional coyote. It never gets easier, but you learn how to breathe around the herd. The deputy's cruiser is parked on the narrow shoulder when she arrives. Red and blue lights turned off, just the hazard flashes clicking in the dark. He meets her by the ditch, careful with his flashlight. The mother bobcat lies where she fell, body still, eyes already losing their light. Nora kneels beside her for a moment, not touching, just acknowledging. This was a hunter, a mother, a creature who knew this hillside better than any map ever could. Then, from the tangle of wet grass and briars, a sound. A tiny, hoarse hiss. The kind of sound a baby makes when it thinks the whole world is an enemy. "There," the deputy says, keeping his voice low. "I didn't want to move him till you got here." Nora eases her hands into thick gloves and parts the grass. There he is. A bobcat kitten, no bigger than 2 pounds, fur plastered to his body from the rain, eyes blown wide. His body shakes from cold, from fear, from sheer confusion. He opens his mouth to hiss again, but it comes out thin and ragged. For a moment, she doesn't see a wild animal. She sees her own son at 5, shaking in a hospital bed the night he broke his arm. She sees the way her husband's hand trembled on the day they got the diagnosis that changed everything. Fear has the same look, whether it's in human eyes or yellow ones. She lifts the kitten gently, wrapping him in a towel she keeps just for nights like this. He claws at the fabric, at the air, at anything he can reach, furious at being small and helpless. That fury is a good sign. It means there's still fight in him. In the truck, the cabin fills with the smell of wet fur and mud. The kitten's breathing is too fast, his head too heavy for his neck. Nora drives one-handed, the other resting lightly on the small bundle beside her, not to restrain him, just to let him know something solid is there. As she drives back toward Willow Creek, the explanation comes in her own quiet thoughts, the way she'll later share it with the audience. A bobcat this young should still be pressed to his mother's side, learning her scent, her rhythm, the difference between wind in the trees and danger in the brush. He should be nursing every few hours, building muscle, and learning that the world has rules. Without that, his odds are not just bad, they're almost impossible. But almost is a word Nora has never taken very seriously. Back at the farmhouse, the clinic room glows under bright, practical lights. Stainless steel table, shelves of carefully labeled bottles, a cabinet full of tiny syringes and gauze. She works quickly. Warm fluids, a heat pad, and a check for injuries beyond the obvious trauma of being alone. The kitten's eyes dart around, trying to take in this strange new world. The sharp scent of disinfectant, the hum of the old refrigerator, the distant ticking of the living room clock. Every muscle in his body says he should be in a hollow log or a rock den, pressed against a heartbeat that sounds like his own. Instead, he has Nora, a human in her 50s, with tired hands, a sore back, and a heart that is broken and mended more times than she ever expected. She tucks him into a small crate lined with blankets, sets the first bottle to warm, and glances toward the doorway. In the dim hallway stands a pale shape, just watching. A housecat, patient and still, eyes steady on the crate. We'll meet her properly in a moment. Her name is Pearl, and she's about to change this bobcat's life in ways no one can imagine yet. For now, Nora leans on the counter and lets out a slow breath. Somewhere out on that dark road, a mother's body is cooling in the rain. In here, her last kitten is fighting for breath. Loss and hope, sitting in the same small room. If you've ever stood in a kitchen in the middle of the night, holding onto something fragile, wondering if you're enough, you already understand Nora better than you think. Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. In the next part, we'll step into Pearl's quiet world and see how one old housecat, with grief of her own, becomes the softest bridge between home and the wild. Before the wild bobcat kitten ever laid eyes on Pearl, there were already 2 orphans living under that roof. One walked on 2 legs, one walked on 4. Neither of them would have used that word, but that's what they were. In the soft gray of early morning, Nora moves through the farmhouse on autopilot. First, the coffee pot, then the clinic. The bobcat kitten is still wrapped in blankets, breathing a little easier than he did a few hours ago. His sides rise and fall in quick little movements, like he's still arguing with the world in his sleep. Nora checks the tiny body with practiced hands. Temperature, hydration, the weight of him in her palms. A wild bobcat this young is all edges and bones, more need than substance. She tucks him back into the crate, sets the next bottle to warm, and steps out into the hallway. That's where Pearl is waiting. Pearl doesn't rush or meow. She simply sits there, white fur a little rumpled from sleep, watching the closed door of the clinic, like someone waiting outside a hospital room. Her tail rests neatly against the floor. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was just curious. The truth goes back a few years, to a different living room in a different house. For a moment, we leave the Smoky Mountains and step into a small brick home in town. There's a recliner by the window, the kind with worn arms and a permanent indent in the cushion. An older woman sits there with a blanket over her knees, and Pearl is curled up sleeping on her lap. The TV is on low, some afternoon game show. Outside, the world keeps moving. But in that room, time is measured in cups of tea and the rise and fall of an old woman's chest. Pearl learned her whole world by that rhythm. The sound of the kettle, the slow shuffle to the kitchen, the way the sun moved across the carpet. She learned what it felt like to be someone's whole comfort. And then one day, the recliner was empty. There's no drama in it here, just a neighbor's voice on the phone, a quiet car in the driveway, the sound of a door that doesn't open again. Pearl was scooped up, placed gently in a carrier. She watched that living room shrink in the rear window, not knowing that nothing in her life would ever smell like that blanket again. She arrived at Nora's rescue with a file that said, "Owner deceased, no family available." Nora read it in the intake room, put the folder down, and opened the crate. Pearl stepped out, looked around, and chose Nora's lap without ceremony. Some animals take a long time to trust. Pearl moved like she'd decided there wasn't time to waste. Since then, the farmhouse has given her everything she needs. Warm beds, regular meals, quiet laps, a place in the sunny window. She watches finches, listens to owls, and dozes through thunderstorms. Her life is gentle, safe, steady. But if you've ever had an empty house after a funeral, you know that safety isn't the same as fullness. Nora feels it too. The halls that once echoed with slammed doors and teenage arguments now hear the soft click of her boots and the occasional clang of a metal food bowl. Her kids call on Sundays, send photos of their own busy lives. When she hangs up, the kitchen feels one size too big. So here they are, Nora and Pearl, a woman who lost a husband and the future she thought she was building, and a housecat who lost the lap that was her whole world. Two orphans of different species, sharing a home that's part family, part wildlife hospital. And now there is a third little life in the next room, a bobcat kitten who has no memory of his mother's face, only the thunder of a truck and the cold sting of roadside rain. This is where the explanation comes into focus. Those first 10 days with a wild bobcat are what Nora calls the survival stage. Every 3 hours, around the clock, she warms a bottle, checks his temperature, and weighs him on a kitchen scale. She notes every tiny change, a slightly stronger suckle, a longer stretch of sleep, the first time his body relaxes fully against the blankets, instead of staying coiled and ready to fight. For now, the kitten and Pearl don't meet. Nora keeps them separate, letting scent travel under doors and through the air vents. Pearl spends a lot of time in the hallway outside the clinic. She lies down, head facing the crack under the door, ears pricked whenever the bobcat fusses. There's a small moment one afternoon that tells you everything you need to know. Nora is in the clinic, trying to coax the kitten, who she's started calling Ridge after the hills that nearly took him, into taking more formula. He pushes the bottle away with surprising force, tiny paws batting with pure, offended outrage. He's tired of being handled, tired of needles and towels in the bright light above his head. Nora pauses, bottle in midair, and leans close enough to feel his breath on her wrist. The frustration hits her in a wave, not at him, but at the unfairness of it all, at how many lives she has held at this exact edge between hope and loss. For a second, she feels every year in her joints. Out in the hallway, Pearl stands up. She walks to the clinic door and rests one paw gently against it. Not scratching, not demanding, just present. Inside, Ridge quiets for a moment, eyes tracking something he can't see. Nora catches it. There is another heartbeat in this house, who knows something about losing the one place that felt like home. That's the soft reflection at the center of this part of the story. Sometimes the most powerful comfort in a house isn't the person who feeds you. It's the other soul who understands, without words, what it means to have lost your anchor. A fresh way to look at it is this. We often think of rescue as one way. The human saves the animal. But in this farmhouse, rescue is a circle. Nora saves Pearl from a shelter. Pearl quietly holds Nora's evenings together. And now, both of them are about to be asked to help save a tiny wild bobcat who doesn't know he needs them yet. Those first 10 days end with 3 lives under one roof, all listening for one another in their own way. Ridge, the bobcat kitten, is learning that the world no longer smells like asphalt and fear. Pearl, the housecat, is learning there's a new sound in the house that wakes her from naps. Nora, somewhere between them, measuring bottles and grief in equal amounts. If you've ever had a pet who pulled you through a lonely season, or found yourself caring for something small when your own heart felt worn out, you already recognize the ground we're standing on. In the next part, we'll step into that sunlit room, where Nora finally opens the crate door, and Pearl meets Ridge, face to face. That first touch of trust between housecat and bobcat will change the rhythm of this home forever. If this quiet unfolding is speaking to you so far, stay with me. The most tender moments are still ahead. The day Pearl finally met the bobcat kitten, the whole house seemed to hold its breath. No storms, no phone calls, just a stillness that felt like the world was giving them room. It had been a little over a week since Nora carried Ridge in from that rain-slicked roadside. The survival stage was doing its quiet work. His temperature was steady now, his eyes clearer, his tiny bobcat body no longer shaking with every breath. He'd gone from might not make it through the night to maybe, just maybe. And that's when Nora knew the next step couldn't wait much longer. The bobcat needed more than syringes and warmth. He needed a sense of mother, even if it came from a place no one expected. Nora chose the sunroom for their first meeting. It was the gentlest space in the house. Wide windows, soft light, an old rug faded by years of Tennessee mornings. She cleared away anything sharp, anything that might startle. A few blankets on the floor, a carrier in the corner, a chair pushed back just enough so she could sit and watch without hovering. Pearl walked in on her own. There was no drama to it, no coaxing, no treats. She padded through the doorway, tail calm, and settled near the center of the room as if this was just another Tuesday. If you didn't know her story, you might think she was indifferent. But Nora had watched her pacing outside the clinic door for days, sitting vigil with her ear pressed to the crack whenever the bobcat fussed. Now, Pearl simply waited. This is where it's important to pause and explain what's really happening under that soft light. Introducing a housecat to a wild bobcat isn't something you do because it's cute or because the internet might like it. It's something you only do under strict permits and professional guidance, when the choice is between giving an orphan a shot at comfort or watching him grow up without any model of what safe feels like. Even then, it's a risk. Nora knows the danger of a wild animal becoming too attached to human spaces. She knows a bobcat can never be a pet, so she keeps certain lines firm. Pearl is the bridge, not the destination. Nora will always step back when the time comes. And she wants anyone watching to understand, this isn't something to copy at home. This is what happens at the thin place, where wildlife rehab and last chances meet. With Pearl settled, Nora carries Ridge into the room in his crate. He's bigger now, but still light in her hands. When she sets the crate down, the change in him is immediate. He smells something he can't place. Familiar, but not. Fur, warmth, a quiet that isn't his own. Inside, he lets out a low growl, more habit than threat. Pearl doesn't flinch. She rises, walks a slow half circle around the crate, nose working, taking in every scent Ridge has brought in from the clinic. Formula, disinfectant, wild musk. Her tail stays steady. Finally, she sits again, not pressed close, not far away, just there, like a lighthouse at the edge of the room. From inside the crate, two bobcat eyes peer through the slats. Ridge has never seen anything like her. She's not human, not the cold metal table, not the dark ditch where he last felt his mother's side. She's small, solid, and utterly unconcerned with his anger. Nora kneels beside the crate, one hand on the latch. Her heart is doing that mix of pounding and ache that only happens when you know you're about to change something you can't change back. "Easy, Ridge," she murmurs. "You're not alone in here anymore." She opens the door. At first, he doesn't move. Wild instincts are loud in a bobcat's bones, even at this age. Open spaces mean danger. New scents mean choices. He sends out a warning hiss, tiny teeth bared, just to let the room know he's nobody's baby. Pearl blinks slowly, the way cats do when they're saying, "I see you, and I'm not a threat." Little by little, Ridge inches forward. One paw, then another, claws tipped for escape if he needs it. His body is tight as a coiled spring. He keeps glancing back at the crate, then at Pearl, as if weighing which unknown is safer. This is the example that lingers, creeping across a faded rug toward a housecat who's never hunted anything more dangerous than a moth. When he's close enough to smell the warmth coming off her, something in him hesitates. His head tilts. The hiss fades. And then he does something so small you could almost miss it. He leans forward and bumps his forehead, clumsy and quick, against her shoulder. It's not graceful. It's not confident. It's the uncertain, universal nudge of a creature who has decided, just for this breath, to trust. Pearl's response is instant. She lowers her head and begins to groom the top of his head in slow, steady strokes. Nothing dramatic, no theatrics, just a tired, older cat doing what she's done for every frightened soul she's ever taken in, giving them a rhythm to breathe against. Nora feels her throat tighten. It takes her back. On the first day, one of her kids finally laughed after their father's funeral. For the first time, she let a neighbor sit at her kitchen table and talk about something other than the hospital. Those tiny moments when the world doesn't get fixed, but it shifts, just enough to keep going. There's a fresh way to see this if we let ourselves. We talk a lot about instinct when it comes to wild animals, especially something like a bobcat. Hunt, hide, survive. But there's another instinct we don't name often. The instinct to seek comfort. To reach out when you're terrified. To press into whatever feels steady. That instinct is why a kitten named Ridge is now tucked under the chin of a housecat named Pearl, purring for the first time in his short life. Yes, purring. It starts as a rusty vibration, unsure and uneven, like an engine that hasn't been used in a long time. Pearl's purr answers it, deeper and sure. The two sounds blend in the quiet of that sunroom, wild and domestic, grief and comfort, all tangled together on an old rug. Nora backs out of the room, leaving the door open just enough. She knows this is their moment now. Her job is to watch carefully, step in if needed, and, when the time comes, remember that all of this tenderness has a purpose beyond her own longing to keep him. If you've ever watched two beings who shouldn't understand each other settle into the same rhythm, a grandchild and an aging parent, a rescue dog, and someone who swore they'd never get another pet, you already know how holy these few minutes can feel. In the next part, we'll linger in Pearl's classroom. We'll see how, day by day, this ordinary housecat begins teaching a wild bobcat that the world can be both safe and challenging, and how their quiet lessons ripple far beyond the walls of Nora's little home. If this first touch of trust is stirring something in you, stay close. The way Pearl and Ridge grow together may bring back some memories of your own. Pearl never set out to be a teacher. She didn't write a lesson plan or hang a sign on the door, but slowly, quietly, one room in Nora's farmhouse turned into a classroom, and a housecat became the first safe language a wild bobcat ever learned. By the third week, Ridge isn't just surviving anymore. He's exploring. In the wild, this is the season when a bobcat kitten would start trailing after his mother, clumsy paws stepping where she steps, learning which sounds matter and which ones to ignore. Every touch, every look, every gentle nip would teach him something about the world. In Nora's home, that job falls to Pearl. Her classroom is simple. An old rug, a few scattered toys, a sun patch that moves slowly across the floor. The rules are even simpler. Pearl never rushes. She doesn't scold, doesn't perform. She just lives her small, steady life in front of Ridge, and he watches everything. Mornings start the same way now. Nora opens the sunroom door, and Ridge bounds out of his crate with all the energy his little bobcat body can muster. His spots are still soft, his legs a bit too long for his coordination. He might be born wild, but in this season, he is all curiosity. He barrels toward Pearl like a tiny freight train. She does not move. She's already in her favorite position, settled in the middle of the rug, sitting just where the first square of sunlight has reached the floor. Ridge skids to a stop right in front of her, tail whipping, eyes wide, begging for a game. Pearl looks at him for a long moment, and then lies down. She stretches out, rolls once, and closes her eyes. Class, it seems, is in session. Lesson 1, the art of the nap. At first, Ridge doesn't get it. A bobcat this age is programmed to pounce and practice. He hops on her back, chews her ear, and pats her tail. Pearl tolerates exactly as much as she needs to, then calmly pins him with a paw, not hard, just enough to say, "That's enough for now." Eventually, he gives in. He sinks beside her with a tiny huff, copying the way she tucks her paws, matching his breathing to hers. 20 seconds later, the wild kitten who fought the bottle like it was an enemy is sound asleep, nose buried in Pearl's fur. That's the thing Nora will tell you later. It isn't the big moments that make the difference. It's all the small, ordinary ones. The way a housecat naps can teach a bobcat that the world isn't always on fire. As the weeks go on, the lessons grow. Lesson 2 is thunderstorms. One afternoon, dark clouds slide over the Smoky Mountains, and the air changes in that way animals notice first. Ridge paces by the window, tail puffed, ears flicking at the first distant rumble. For him, loud noise means trucks, impact, the cold shock of losing the only warmth he understood. Pearl doesn't even sit up. She yawns, licks one paw clean, and turns her head away from the window. When the thunder cracks closer, she blinks slowly, then deliberately walks across the room to Ridge. She presses her side against his, settles her weight, and starts to purr. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady vibration that says, "This sound is not the enemy. We are safe here." Ridge stiffens at the next boom, but his body leans toward her, almost against his will. His shoulders drop. His breath slows. The storm doesn't stop, but his fear loosens its grip. Somewhere down the hallway, Nora leans in the doorway and thinks about all the storms she sat through alone. Hospital storms, paperwork storms, after-funeral storms. The way a single presence, a friend, a neighbor, a sleepy cat, can make the same thunder feel less sharp. Lesson 3 is grooming. Ridge's early attempts at cleaning himself are pure chaos. He bites at his fur like he's trying to win a fight with it, licks one spot until it stands in wild spikes, and forgets the rest entirely. Pearl watches for a while, then steps in. She starts with his ears, careful and thorough, exactly the way an old woman once groomed her every evening before bed. Ridge freezes the first time, confused by the mix of memory and newness, then melts into it. From Nora's point of view as a rehabber, these scenes are more than cute. They're a bridge. In the wild, grooming is not vanity for a bobcat. It's survival. Keeping scent consistent, removing burrs, staying invisible in the underbrush. Pearl isn't teaching him how to stalk, but she is teaching him that touch can be safe, that being handled isn't always harmful. While these quiet lessons unfold on the rug, something else starts happening beyond the farmhouse walls. Nora's assistant, Dylan, begins recording small snippets on an old camera. No flashy edits, no music at first. Just Pearl and Ridge in their natural rhythm, sharing the sun, riding out a storm, taking turns grooming each other. He uploads a few clips under the simple title, Pearl's Classroom. It doesn't explode overnight, but it does something softer. It spreads quietly. People find it late at night, when their own houses are too quiet. They start leaving comments. A woman in her 60s writes, "I'm up with my husband most nights while he's sick. Watching this bobcat and that old housecat helps me breathe when he finally falls asleep." Another says, "We can't afford pets in our building. Pearl feels like the cat I visit every evening." Nora reads these messages in the glow of her kitchen laptop. Ridge asleep in the next room, Pearl on the back of the chair. It hits her that this classroom doesn't just have one student. In some small way, the lessons are leaking out through the screen to people who feel just as lost and frightened as that bobcat kitten did on his first night. And then there are the 2 a.m. classes, the ones no camera catches. That's when Ridge still needs a bottle here and there, when old fears surface in tiny whimpers. Nora sits cross-legged on the floor, holding the bobcat against her, Pearl tucked up against his spine. She talks in a low voice about her kids, about the day they left for college, about the first night she slept in this house alone. Ridge doesn't understand her words, but he understands the tone. He understands the hand that never drops him, the housecat who never leaves his side. That's his language of safety. There's a different way to see all this if we step back. We tend to think only a wild mother can teach a wild child what it needs, but sometimes, in the cracks of life, another kind of teacher steps in. A retired neighbor, a step-grandparent, a tired old cat who's been loved and left, and still chooses to show up. Of course, there's another side to this, and Nora feels it more with each passing week. Ridge is growing. His paws hit the floor with a little more weight. His play is a little wilder. His jumps, a little higher. Pearl still has control of the classroom, but Nora can see the arc already. This room, this house, this gentle season, they cannot hold him forever. In the next part, we'll feel that tension more clearly. We'll watch as the wild in Ridge begins to outgrow the living room, and Nora is forced to face a harder question. How do you let go of a creature you've held this close? If Pearl's quiet lessons are stirring something in you, a memory of who once made you feel safe, stay with me. The love in this farmhouse is about to be tested in a new way. It happened so quietly. Nora almost missed it. One morning, as Ridge dropped from the back of the couch to the floor, the sound changed. It wasn't the soft patter of a kitten anymore. It was a thud, light but certain, the sound of a wild bobcat who was starting to fit his own paws. By the time summer settled over the Smoky Mountains, Ridge was no longer the fragile bundle Nora lifted with one hand. He was long-legged, solid, and full of the kind of energy you can't bottle feed away. His spots had deepened, his shoulders had broadened. When he walked, even across that worn living room rug, he moved like the hills outside had already claimed him. This is the season Nora calls the in-between. Too big to be safe in a house, too young to be safe in the wild. From the outside, it still looked adorable. Pearl's classroom videos showed a bobcat and a housecat curled together in the sun, sharing toys, sharing naps. But in person, Nora saw the things the camera didn't catch. The way Ridge's play swats landed just a little too hard now. The way his claws, even half-sheathed, left faint marks on the wood floor. The way his pupils widened when a squirrel ran along the fence outside. Something ancient stirred in him. One afternoon, he hit a turning point. Nora had set up a simple play area in the sunroom, a hanging feather toy, a sturdy scratching post, and a low shelf he liked to leap from. Ridge had always attacked the feather with gleeful ferocity, then run back to Pearl like a child showing off a drawing. This time, when Nora flicked the feather, he didn't pounce right away. He crouched low, shoulders rolling, eyes fixed. His whole body went silent. Then, in a blur, he took the feather down in one clean, efficient move that made Nora's breath catch. It wasn't a game anymore. It was practice. Pearl, watching from the rug, seemed to recognize it too. She stood, walked over, and bumped her head against his shoulder, as if to remind him, just for now, this is still home. This is where the explanation becomes important. A wild bobcat kitten is not like a domestic kitten, which can simply grow up into a larger version of the same pet. Ridge was always meant to be a solitary hunter, not a housemate. His time in Nora's living room was a bridge, not a destination. Nora knew from the beginning there would come a day when keeping him indoors would stop being kindness and start being cruelty, to him and to Pearl. Her job as a wildlife rehabber wasn't to keep what she loved. It was to get them ready to leave. Knowing something in your head, though, is very different from feeling it in your chest. At night, when the house finally quieted, Nora often found herself at the kitchen table with a mug gone cold, the laptop open to messages from strangers. The Pearl's classroom videos had grown into a quiet little community. People wrote from all over. I lost my dog this spring. Watching this bobcat and your sweet housecat has helped my heart slow down again. I'm caring for my mom full-time. When I can't sleep, I put on Ridge and Pearl and remember there's still gentleness in the world. And then there were the messages Nora had been dreading, though she understood them. Please don't ever let him go. He belongs with you and Pearl. You're his family. One evening, she read that line over and over, the glow of the screen reflecting off the window pane. Behind her, Ridge thudded past in the hallway, chasing a toy. Pearl followed at her usual unhurried pace, tail held in that neutral, steady line that had become the heartbeat of the house. Nora's chest ached with the truth. Part of her wanted exactly what those commenters wanted. To freeze time. To keep the bobcat asleep in the familiar sunspots, safe under Pearl's watchful eye. To ignore the pull of the ridge outside where his name had come from. But the other part of her, the part that had signed the permits and learned the laws and watched too many wild things fail to cope after being kept too tame, knew. That wasn't why she'd said yes on that rainy night. So she did what she'd always done when a decision was too heavy to carry alone. She picked up the phone. "Doctor." Marcus Hall answered on the second ring. His rehab center, Laurel Ridge, sat deeper in the mountains, on land that held more trees than houses and more silence than roads. He'd been in the back of her mind since the sheriff's first call. "Tell me about his weight," Marcus said. "His behavior." "How rough is he with your housecat?" Nora described Ridge's jumps, his new precision with toys, the way he'd begun to stalk shadows and sounds only he could hear. She explained how Pearl still kept him in line, but she could feel the balance shifting. Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said gently, "It sounds like you've done exactly what he needed you to do. He's ready for the next step." They picked a date. On the calendar, it looked simple. A circle around a Wednesday, a note that read, "Ridge to Laurel Ridge." But for Nora, it split time in two, before and after. The days leading up to it were full of small, painful firsts. The first time she flinched, just a little, when Ridge's play swat caught her forearm through her sweatshirt. The first time she found Pearl retreating to a higher perch when his games went on too long. The first time she caught herself holding back from scooping him up. She reminded herself that her affection should not make it harder for him to leave. There's a soft reflection here that many of you may recognize. That moment when someone you've cared for grows beyond the space you can offer. A child getting restless in a small town, an aging parent needing more care than you can provide alone, even a job that no longer fits who you've become. We like to tell ourselves that love means holding on, but sometimes the deeper love is in admitting that your living room, your kitchen, your heart, they were meant to be a passage, not a destination. Nora began to talk to Ridge differently in those last evenings. Not with fewer words, but with a new intention. She would sit on the floor of the sunroom, Ridge sprawled nearby, Pearl tucked against her leg, and say things he couldn't possibly understand. But she needed to hear. "You're not mine, you know," she murmured, fingers resting lightly on his back. "You belong to the hills. I'm just the layover in between." He'd respond by rolling onto his side, big paws in the air, utterly at home. That's when the fear would come, sharp and sudden. What if I've given him something he'll spend the rest of his life missing? It's a question any foster parent, of humans or animals, has probably asked in the dark. Am I making it harder? Will they ache for this softness when the world gets rough? There's a fresh way to look at it, though, and it came to Nora one night as she watched Ridge sleep with Pearl pressed to his spine. Maybe the point isn't to protect them from ever missing anything. Maybe the point is to give them enough of the right things, safety, kindness, trust, that even when they're gone, those things live on inside them. When the morning of the move arrived, the farmhouse felt strangely quiet. Ridge walked into the transport crate without much fuss, more curious than afraid. Nora laid one of Pearl's older blankets inside, its fabric worn thin by years of naps. Pearl followed them to the door, as she always did. She didn't cry. She didn't claw at the carrier. She just stood there, eyes steady on the bobcat she had washed and warmed and pinned down when he forgot how to rest. Nora loaded the crate into the truck, hands lingering on the door for an extra second. The ridge outside was wrapped in mist, the road ahead climbing into hills that had been his home long before any human built a house there. If you've ever tucked someone into a car, or watched them walk through a gate, knowing they had to go but wishing they could stay a little longer, you know exactly what this driveway felt like. In the next part of the story, we'll ride along with Ridge up into those higher, quieter woods. We'll step into Laurel Ridge Rehabilitation Center and see what it really looks like when a bobcat has to trade the safety of a living room for the harder, wilder classroom of the forest. If this season of in-between is echoing something in your own life, stay with me. What happens next is harder in some ways, but it's also where the promise of that first rescue call finally starts to come true. The road to Laurel Ridge climbs in slow, patient curves, like it knows there's no point hurrying a mountain. In the back of Nora's truck, Ridge lies in his crate, body low, eyes sharp, listening to a world he's never really known. Wind in tall trees, gravel under tires, the distant call of a hawk. For the first time since that night in the rain, Nora isn't driving him toward more comfort. She's driving him toward the wild that took his mother, and still, somehow, is where he belongs. Laurel Ridge Rehabilitation Center sits on the kind of land that feels older than the road that leads to it. Forest wraps around it on all sides. Mixed hardwoods, rhododendron thickets, the kind of undergrowth where a wild bobcat can vanish in 3 strides. There are no front doors for the public, no gift shop, no tours. Just a few weathered buildings tucked back from the gravel and a series of enormous enclosures that look less like cages and more like pieces of forest held together by wire and intention. This is where Ridge has to learn the language his mother would have taught him, the language of the forest. When Nora and Dr. Marcus Hall lift Ridge's crate out of the truck, the air feels different. Cooler, thinner somehow. Ridge can smell it through the vents. Damp earth, leaf mold, the musk of other wild things. Marcus speaks softly, more for Nora than for the bobcat. First phase is transition, he explains. He'll be in a smaller enclosure at the edge of the big one. He can see the others, smell them, but not mix in just yet. We keep human contact to an absolute minimum from here. It's an important distinction. At Nora's farmhouse, human hands meant food, comfort, safety. Here, they need to fade into the background. Ridge has to relearn who he is without a bottle or a housecat nearby. When they open the crate inside his new space, Ridge steps out with that same cautious grace he showed in Nora's sunroom. Head low, ears turning. He tests the ground, then looks up at the world around him. Real branches, real dirt, real rocks warmed by real sun. He takes in another scent and goes very still. Across the fence, in the larger enclosure, another bobcat is watching him. Older, heavier, eyes half-lidded in that way predators have when they're already 10 steps ahead in their minds. Ridge has never met one of his own kind before. He doesn't know if this is a friend, a rival, or something else entirely. But he does something that tells Nora more than any scientific test could. He doesn't run to the fence. He doesn't press himself against it. He just stares, absorbing everything. The other cat's posture, the way it breathes, the way it owns the space it's in. That is his new teacher now. The first hunting lesson comes a few days later. In the wild, a young bobcat would learn to hunt by following its mother, copying her movements, failing over and over until instinct and practice finally line up. At Laurel Ridge, the process is similar, just structured. Marcus watches from a blind as a small live prey animal is released into Ridge's enclosure. The goal isn't to be cruel. It's to give Ridge a chance to do what his body was built for, so that when the time comes, he won't starve. Ridge notices the movement immediately. Every muscle locks in, the way Nora saw in the living room that day with the feather toy. But here, there's no couch, no rug, no familiar housecat watching, just open space and expectation. His first attempt is clumsy. He pounces too soon, misjudges the distance and lands in a spray of dirt while the prey bolts away. For a second, he just stands there, tail twitching, more surprised than anything else. In Nora's house, a miss only meant the toy swung back for another try. Out here, it means an empty belly. From his blind spot, Marcus smiles a little. Good, he murmurs. He's learned he can miss and try again. Because that's what Ridge does. He doesn't sulk. He doesn't look around as if waiting for help. He regroups, lowers his body, and this time he takes the extra seconds to track, to listen, to feel the rhythm of the space. The second attempt is cleaner, not perfect, not yet, but enough to show he's listening to a language older than any house he's slept in. While Ridge is learning the forest is quietly teaching something too. Telephone lines give way to tree lines here. Tire tracks fade into deer paths. Bobcats in these mountains keep rodent populations in check, which in turn protects gardens and crops, which in turn supports the people living in the valley below. One wild bobcat is not just a solitary animal. He's part of a system, whether we see him or not. That's one of the soft truths woven through this part of the story. The wild doesn't stop at the edge of the national park sign. It runs under our driveways, around our cul-de-sacs, along the backs of our fences. At night, while Ridge adjusts to a world without Pearl's purr, Nora lies awake back at Willow Creek, thinking about that. She remembers the calls that brought so many animals to her door. Foxes hit on back roads, raccoons poisoned by garbage, owls stunned by cars. All those small intersections where human life and wildlife collide. She can't fix all of it, but she can do this. She can take one bobcat who should have died in a ditch and give him a second chance to move through these hills the way he was designed to. Marcus sends updates sparingly, careful not to turn Ridge's rehab into a show. A short note: first successful hunt today. A grainy trail cam photo of Ridge perched on a rock in the first dusting of early snow, fur thick, body relaxed. Ridge has grown into himself out there. He moves with the muted confidence of a native, no longer the too big kitten thudding off Nora's couch. The forest has become his classroom now. Wind, scent, the scrape of bark under claws, the whisper of prey in dry leaves. And yet, here's a fresh way to see it. The wild has not erased what Pearl and Nora gave him. It has built on it. When storms roll over Laurel Ridge, Ridge doesn't panic. He seeks shelter under an overhang, the way his bones tell him to. But he settles more quickly than some of the others. Somewhere deep under the instinct, there's still a memory of a housecat leaning against him, telling his trembling muscles, "We're safe." Softness didn't make him weak, it made him whole. As autumn deepens and the first real cold fronts sweep down the mountains, Marcus calls Nora with the update she's been both longing for and dreading. He's ready, Marcus says, hunting well, avoiding the fence when people come by. He's as wary as he should be. It's time to start planning his release site. Nora hangs up and steps out onto her porch. The air in her little valley has that clean, sharp edge it gets before winter. Somewhere up in those ridges, a bobcat she bottle-fed is threading his way through underbrush, invisible and entirely himself. If you've ever watched someone you helped raise start to speak fluently in a world that once terrified them, a new language, a new city, a new life stage, you already understand what's stirring in Nora's chest. In the next part, we'll stand beside her on the day everything comes full circle. We'll see what it looks like when a woman who has lost so much chooses again to open her hands and let a wild bobcat go. If the idea of learning a new forest language at any age, of leaving comfort to grow, touches something in you, stay close. The release is coming, and it carries a kind of quiet courage that might feel familiar. On the morning Ridge is meant to go free, Nora wakes up before her alarm. Not because she's rested, but because some part of her body already knows. Today, she has to open her hands. The Smoky Mountains are still half asleep when she pulls into the gravel lot at Laurel Ridge. A thin mist hangs in the trees. The air smells like cold rock, damp leaves, and that faint metallic tang that comes right before winter settles in for good. This is not a day of surprises. It's a day of decisions. Marcus meets her by the gate with a nod and a simple sentence. "He's ready." Those two words are the explanation for months of careful work. Ridge is hunting on his own, keeping weight. He avoids the fence when he hears human footsteps, moving like a wild bobcat should, unseen more often than not. In other words, everything Nora ever hoped for on that first rainy night, and everything that makes this day hurt. They drive together in a quiet ATV up a narrow trail, a crate in the back. Inside, Ridge waits, eyes bright, body steady. This crate is bigger than the one Nora first carried him in, but something about the way he braces his paws feels familiar. He's always handled change by watching first, acting second. The release site is a protected stretch of mixed forest and old field on land that local folks fought hard to keep from becoming another road or subdivision. There's a small stream, a stand of oaks heavy with leaf litter, and just enough open space that a bobcat can slip between shadow and light without ever crossing a fence line. Marcus lays a hand on the crate. "We've checked the area," he says quietly. "Plenty of prey, water year-round, no major roads within miles. If a bobcat's going to make it anywhere, it's here." It's the logical explanation, the science, and it matters. But Nora isn't standing in the leaves doing math. She's standing in the leaves doing grief and gratitude at the same time. Before she opens the crate, she asks Marcus for a minute. He nods and steps back, giving her space. Nora kneels beside the crate and lays both hands on the top, feeling the faint vibration of Ridge's movement underneath. For a moment, she isn't at Laurel Ridge. She's in her kitchen at 2 a.m., warming bottles. She's in the sunroom, watching Pearl pin a too-excited bobcat to the rug until he remembers how to rest. She's in the driveway, loading him up the day she brought him here, telling herself this was right, even as everything in her wanted to turn around. She has a small ritual she does for every wild soul she releases. She's never told anyone the whole of it. It's not fancy. There are no candles or speeches, just 3 simple things. First, she thanks the animal's unseen mother. She keeps her voice low, words almost a breath. "I couldn't be you," she whispers now, fingers curling against the crate. "But I tried to stand in the gap. He's going where you would have taken him if the road hadn't been there." Second, she thanks the land. She turns her head, looking up into the trees at the ridgeline, at the sky that will see Ridge in every season, if he survives. "Take him," she thinks, or maybe says aloud. "Teach him what I can't. Hide him when he needs hiding. Feed him when he earns it." The third, and this is the part she's only added in recent years, she thanks herself for answering the phone, for losing sleep, for risking another heartbreak when so many had already carved their names into her life. It's not pride. It's a way of acknowledging that the work of loving is not free. It costs something, and that cost is worth honoring. If you've ever buckled a child into a car on their first solo drive, or signed the papers for a loved one to move into a place that can care for them better than you can, you know this feeling in your bones. It's the knowledge that you have done all you can in the space that was yours, and now it's someone else's turn. Nora steps back. Marcus lifts the latch. For a moment, nothing happens. Ridge stays inside, nose lifted, taking in the current of the air. It carries a chorus of scents. Mice, birds, the cool mineral breath of the stream, the musk of deer that passed through before dawn. Then he moves. He steps out with that quiet confidence that only comes from a body in the right place. No frantic scramble, no desperate sprint. Each paw lands with purpose on soil that has never known the pad of his feet before, and yet feels like it fits him better than any rug ever did. He pauses once, halfway between the crate and the underbrush, head turned slightly to the side. The light hits his coat, and for a heartbeat, Nora sees all of him at once. The sickly kitten from the ditch, the overgrown youngster on her couch, the half-wild student at Laurel Ridge. All of those versions of Ridge live inside this one, moving through the leaves. And then he's gone. He doesn't look back, not once. He slips into the brush as if he's stepping through a door that was always meant to open for him. Marcus lets out a breath. Nora didn't realize he'd been holding. "That," he says quietly, "is perfect. No hesitation, no checking in with us. He's going to be just fine." Fine is one word for it. Necessary is another. Nora stands there with her hands empty and her throat tight. This is what she wanted from the moment the sheriff called. A wild bobcat, healthy and wary, disappearing into a landscape that needs him. And yet, there's a small ache that doesn't have a clean label. She knows that when the snow comes, Ridge will not be curled under Pearl's chin. When thunder cracks, there won't be a farmhouse roof over his head. He will rely on the forest now, and on the instincts his mother gave him in the womb, and that the hills have been patiently waking up. There's a fresh way to see this, though, and it reaches past bobcats and housecats and into the heart of anyone listening. Letting go is not erasing what came before. It's trusting that the love, safety, and tenderness someone received in your care will travel with them, even when they walk out of your sight. It's believing that a wild bobcat can carry a housecat's lessons into the snow, just as grown children carry the rhythm of their childhood homes into apartments 3 states away. On the drive back down the mountain, the crate sits empty in the back of Nora's truck. The blanket that once held Pearl's scent is folded neatly inside. She glances at it in the rearview mirror and feels both strangely hollow and quietly full. Back at Willow Creek, Pearl is waiting in the usual spot by the door. She sniffs the empty crate, then turns away without drama, padding toward the nursery room where new arrivals have already started to fill the silence Ridge left behind. A pair of raccoon kits chirr nervously in their pen. A songbird flutters in a covered cage. Pearl hops up onto a low shelf, settles in, and starts to purr. Nora watches her, a half smile breaking through the tired lines on her face. "Of course," she murmurs. "Work's not done, is it?" If you've ever reached the end of something, a caregiving season, a long project, a marriage, a job, and discovered that life quietly handed you another soul to tend, another task to meet, you know that feeling too. In the final part of this story, we'll jump ahead in time. We'll see how a trail camera in the snow, a letter from a stranger, and one very old housecat bring everything back around in a way that leaves more than one person in tears. If you're still here, if you've walked with Nora and Pearl and Ridge this far, stay with me just a little longer. The last glimpse of this wild bobcat's life and the housecat who shaped it might touch a place in you that's been waiting to be seen. 2 winters after Ridge disappeared into the trees, the Smoky Mountains were wrapped in quiet. Snow sat in soft folds along the fence lines at Willow Creek. The rescue runs never really stopped. But that January morning, the thing that changed everything didn't arrive in a carrier. It arrived in Nora's email. The subject line from Laurel Ridge was simple. "Thought you'd want to see this." Inside was a short trail camera clip and one sentence from Marcus. "Pretty sure this is your boy." That's the mini hook, but here's what's really happening. This isn't just a wildlife update. It's a bridge between a wild bobcat's life in the hills and one old housecat purring in a kitchen. It's proof that what happened in that little farmhouse didn't stay inside its walls. Nora doesn't open the video right away. She sets a mug down, wipes the counter for no reason, glances toward the hallway. Pearl is there in her usual morning spot, curled on the back of a chair, eyes half closed, tracking Nora with that steady attention that feels almost like prayer. She's older now. Her jumps are shorter, her naps a little longer. She's still the quiet center of the house. On the table beside the laptop is a stack of letters from viewers. Some are creased from being read more than once. A woman in her early 60s from Kansas writes about watching Pearl and the bobcat kitten during chemo treatments, saying the videos helped her feel less like a patient and more like a person again. A retired teacher from Maine says she plays Pearl's classroom every night before bed. And for a few minutes, her small apartment feels like a farmhouse filled with life. The explanation is simple. What started as one wild bobcat rescue became a lifeline for people scattered all over the map, people who saw pieces of their own stories in a housecat who'd lost her person and a bobcat kitten who'd lost his mother. Finally, Nora clicks play. The video opens on a patch of winter woods. The frame is narrow, the way trail camera footage always is. Snow lies in a thin, crusted blanket. Air branches tangle against a pale sky. For a few seconds, nothing moves. Then, from the left side of the screen, a shape appears. Broad-shouldered, low to the ground. walking that rolling, quiet walk that only wildcats have.
Even on the grainy footage, Nora's chest tightens. This bobcat is no kitten. His coat is thick, patterned with those familiar spots. His body is compact, strength, all muscle and intention. He moves like the land belongs to him. Marcus has slowed the clip just enough that you can see it. As the bobcat walks past the camera, his mouth is closed, but there's a small, rhythmic tremor in his throat. In the cold air, each breath leaves the faintest puff, spaced in a steady pattern. The camera has a tiny microphone, and through Nora's speakers comes a soft, rolling sound under the crunch of snow. Not loud, not dramatic, just a low, continuous purr. A wild bobcat, alone in the winter woods, purring as he walks. That's the example that stays with you. Not a big reunion, not a fur hand, not a dramatic leap into someone's arms. Just a grown bobcat moving through his own territory, carrying a sound that was once only heard in a small sunroom with an old rug and a patient housecat named Pearl. Nora doesn't realize she's crying until a drop hits the edge of the trackpad. It's not the sharp, shocked crying that comes with fresh loss. It's something slower, deeper. The body's way of saying, this mattered. Across the room, Pearl lifts her head. The purr through the speaker is faint, but it's enough. Her ears tilt forward. And then she does something Nora will remember for the rest of her life. She starts to purr back. The same deep, familiar vibration that once wrapped around a shivering bobcat kitten now fills the kitchen again, matching the rhythm coming from the laptop speakers. Old housecat, wild bobcat, two different winters, the same quiet language. There's a soft reflection here that doesn't need to be spelled out. We don't always get to see what becomes of the tenderness we offered in some hard season. The nights we sat up with a sick pet, the months we spent caring for a parent, a spouse, a neighbor, the years we poured into children who now live hours away. Most of the time, those moments just disappear into the past. But now and then, life sends back a small piece of evidence, a phone call, a photo, a trail camera clip that says, it stayed with them. It changed how they move through their world. That's what this video is for, Nora. Proof that the safety Pearl and she wrapped around a terrified bobcat kitten didn't vanish when he walked into the trees. It moved with him. It settled into his bones. It shows itself now in the way he walks his ridge, in the way he trusts the forest enough to purr in the snow. Here's a fresh perspective to carry away from this. We tend to think of the wild and the domestic as opposite worlds. Housecats inside, bobcats out there, people in houses, animals in forests. But the truth is, the boundary is more porous than we think. The kindness we practice in our kitchens, the patience with a scared animal, the way we speak gently to someone who's hurting, the decision to show up one more time when we're tired. That kindness doesn't stop at the front door. It goes out in the people we've helped raise, in the animals we've released, in the way we ourselves move through grocery stores and parking lots and little stretches of woods behind our homes. Somewhere in the Smoky Mountains, a wild bobcat is stalking through brush as we speak. He has no idea anyone's watching this video. He doesn't know his story has been told, that people in living rooms and hospital rooms and quiet apartments whisper, "Ridge," under their breath when they see a shape move at the tree line. He just knows that the world can be dangerous and kind at the same time, and that somewhere in that mixture, he found enough comfort once to keep going. Before we close, I'd like to gently turn the camera toward you for a moment. As you sit here, listening to the soft story of a bobcat and a housecat and a woman in the mountains, maybe take a breath and ask yourself, who was the Pearl in my life? The one who sat beside me in the storm and made it bearable? Who was my Ridge? The wild soul I loved, helped, even for a little while, before I had to let go? And maybe, who am I quietly holding right now? Just by staying, just by caring? If this story of a wild bobcat raised under a farmhouse roof has touched something in your own story, I'd be honored if you'd stay with this little community. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel,
and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next rescue story we share.
And if you feel moved to go one step further, you can use the Super Thanks button or make a small donation. Your support helps real-life rescuers give frightened wild animals, bobcats, owls, foxes, and so many others, a second chance at the lives they were meant to live. Thank you for being here, for caring, and for letting this gentle story sit with you for a while.